When you think about the emerging consumer of government, customer of government, and the emerging citizen or owner of government. You know, I'm used to being broadcast to for 24 hours a week. This is a generation that has grown up not being viewers, they've grown up being actors and users and participators and creators. Further, this is the first time in human history when young people are in authority about something really important. I was in authority on model trains when I was a kid. Today, the 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on this digital revolution that's changing business, commerce, government, and every institution in society. Remember in the 60s, we had a generation gap, big differences between kids and parents over values and lifestyle and so on. Kids and parents get along pretty well today. That generation gap doesn't exist. Look at your iPod and your kid's iPod. There's overlap. My parents didn't even like the Beatles, you know, let alone the Doors. What we have today is what I call the generation lap, where kids are lapping their parents on the info track. And if you've got a teenager in your house, you know what I'm talking about. Who does the systems administration in your home? So this is humbling. This is a panel that I interviewed youngsters. It was a big audience, like 6,000 to 7,000 people. And I gave a talk and interviewed these kids out of the mouths of babes. This is the highest rated session at the conference by of over 100 sessions. And just a little snippet there. On the left is a Canadian, actually, named Rahaf Harfouche. And born in Syria, was studying in Paris. Her boyfriend's in Toronto. So while they're apart, they turn on video Skype all day long to keep their relationship going. They cook together across the Atlantic Ocean and stuff like that. I asked her, you kids use email? She says, oh no, Mr. Tapscott, email is yesterday's technology. I said, if you did use email, what would you use it for? She says, email? That's sort of, I don't know, like a formal technology, say for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. That would be a good use of email. I said to her, aren't you the dumbest generation? There's a book of that title. How the digital age stupefies young Americans and jeopardizes our future. I said, I bet you don't read the newspaper. You probably don't watch the evening news. That's amazing. It just went ahead all by itself. You probably don't watch the evening news. You probably get your news from Jon Stewart in The Daily Show on Comedy Central. She says, I don't think that's a fair characterization of my generation. I think we're pretty informed. She says, it's true I don't read the newspaper, but Mr. Tapscott, have you ever seen one of those things? Like they come out once a day, and they don't have hot links. They're not even multimedia. And you know what? You get this weird black stuff on your fingers. She says, let me tell you how I get my news. I have 60 RSS feeds. I like to triangulate the news so I can form my own opinion. She says, I don't watch evening news, but does anybody? The average age of the ABC Nightly News is 62. She says, it's true I watch The Daily Show, but not to get the news. The Daily Show isn't funny unless you know the news. So we fear what we don't understand. All the cynicism about youth today. Grown Up Digital ended up being a $4 million polemic against this negative view of young people today. All the cynical stuff is not supported by data. They don't give a damn. High school volunteering in Canada and the United States is higher than it's ever been. Gone up year over year for 15 years. They're mean and nasty. Youth crime gone down year over year for 15 years. The number of kids who are clean, who don't do drugs or alcohol in high school, gone up year over year for 15 years. This is just, these people are making this stuff up. They're the dumbest generation. IQ up year over year for 20 years. SAT scores up. Never been harder to get into the toughest universities. There are more kids graduating today in Canada and the United States from universities than ever before. It's just a crock. Now, you're designing a government, you're trying to create services, you're trying to create a democracy. These are the 8 norms that define the generation. Build it around these norms. Freedom. Everyone should have freedom. Kids want freedom of choice. Choices like oxygen. When I was a kid, I had 3 media choices. They want to customize everything. How do you get to customize your interaction with the government? I never got to customize the Mickey Mouse Club when I was a kid. These kids can change their world. It's a generation of scrutinizers. When I was a kid, I saw a picture. It was a picture. These kids see a picture. What is it? An animation, a bot? I'm Moose Lips, and I'm 13 years old, and I'm chatting with Cyber Chick. Is it really Cyber Chick? I need to authenticate. Maybe it's Cyber Chick's younger brother who's trying to jerk me around, or Cyber Chick's dad is trying to find out what's going on with the teenagers. Maybe it's cyber evil person who might harm me. I look at Vogue magazine, I see a model. My daughter looks at the cover and she sees a woman who's been photoshopped and her cheekbones are bigger and her neck is longer. This is a generation with very strong values. They care a lot. The generation of collaborators coming into the workforce, they don't want to be treated like Dilbert. They want to be able to collaborate. What do? They come into the workforce at their fingertips are better tools than exist in our most sophisticated governments and corporations. In their cultures, the new culture of work, all these norms of high performance and innovation and speed and collaboration, we stick them in a cubicle, treat them like Dilbert, and then we ban their tools. We ban Facebook. I was talking to the CIO of a state where the governor had banned Facebook. I said, why did he do that? He says the governor felt young people were wasting their time on the job. I said, well, if young people are wasting their time, is that a technology problem? You fix it by banning a technology? Has that got something to do with job design and workflow and performance management and so on? I said, what was the effect of banning Facebook? He said, well, everybody went to MySpace. I talked to another youngster who works for a government where they banned Facebook. I said, what was the effect of banning Facebook? He said, he had a different answer. He said, it was the single most demoralizing thing management has ever done. It said to us, we don't understand your generation, we don't get collaboration, we don't understand your tools, and we don't trust you. The social network is becoming the new operating system for a government. So what do? We ban it. We do the opposite of what we should do. So, speaking of social networking, I could show you 30 charts, and they all look the same. They all show the old HTML website in red at the bottom being eclipsed by the XML-based community in blue at the top. The old one thought the Internet's about websites. The new one understands the Internet is about collaboration. The old one built a website. The new one built a vibrant community. MTV says we're a provider of content. YouTube says we create a context. The old one's a content provider, the new one's a curator, where you get to create the content. Government shouldn't have websites. A website is such a .com idea. You know, we present our content. We hope you enjoy this information about our government. No. You create a context whereby you can engage citizens. Of course, you use the web to do that. Facebook beats Match.com. Wikipedia beats Britannica. Flickr beats Kodak Gallery. Because you go onto Flickr, you tag that picture of your puppy, like I did, Bernese Mountain Dog, and I'm in a community with 934 other Bernese Mountain Dog owners, and I'm finding out why my puppy eats sticks and has digestive problems. I'm in a community. You can't do that on Kodak EasyShare. It's a new blog every second of the day, 24 hours of the day. A lot of them are garbage, and some of them are bigger than the mainstream media. Huffington Post has, according to Google in September, Google Analytics, 27 million readers, unique viewers. New York Times has 1.5. So this is a big change, and it's all about self-organization. I gave my son Alex, it was almost 3 years ago at Christmas, I gave him an advance copy of a book I'd written called Wikonomics, and he said, thanks, Dad. I gave him some other things for Christmas, too, okay? He went off, he started reading the book, he came back a couple hours later, he said, hey, Dad, this is a good book, like he's surprised or something. He said, I think I'll create a community on Facebook. I watched him. 6 minutes later, he's got 10 members. By the time we're eating turkey on Christmas night, he's got 130 members, in 7 countries, 7 regional coordinators, a president, secretary, and chief information officer for the community. He sent out a PDF of the first 2 chapters of the book. I got kids writing back in saying, Mr. Tapscott, we found errors in your book. And the community is placing demands on me. How exactly is Mr. Tapscott going to contribute to our community? There's something really important going on here. 2 words. It's called self-organization. It's been around throughout human history. Language was a function of self-organization. There was no central committee of the English language that said this will be called a cup. It just kind of happened. Government was a function of self-organization. But what used to take place over millennia or centuries can now happen on a single Christmas day. I never could have created a community of 130 people in 7 countries when I was 20, regardless of what I did. Alex did it before I'm eating turkey on Christmas Day. And of course, people have a great need to self-organize. And demographics plus technology equals revolutionary change. That's been my thesis for 20 years. Biggest demographic of any country in the world, 13 to 31 years old, is in Iran. You combine that with access to the internet and secular information. This is not about who gets elected as president. This is a challenge to the theocracy. And we're in a pre-revolutionary situation there, and it will get deeper and deeper. So, the third big change is an economic revolution. I'm running out of time, but just suffices to say, this is the main idea in Wikinomics, that the internet is not about .coms, eyeballs, websites, stickiness, page views, or any of that. It's a new platform that radically drops collaboration costs. And that means that vertically integrated companies are unbundling and building networks. Cisco understood this. Nortel didn't. Cisco built a business web where they focus on what they do best. And they're enormously successful as a result. And now the web is dropping costs to the point that peers outside the boundaries of companies can cooperate to create value. So if you can create an encyclopedia with 1 million people who've never met, it's 10 times bigger than Britannica in 100 languages, and according to the big study that's been done, the quality is just as good as Britannica. What else could you create? Could you create a computer operating system? Well, Linux is the dominant operating system in the world for medium and large computers. Nobody owns it. It's created by a bunch of digital Rotarians. Linux has some big customers like China. So the deep structure and architecture of the corporation is changing. You know something? The vertically integrated corporation grew up at the same time as the old vertically integrated model of government. Bureaucracy, 90 years ago, was a really cool term. It was the new big idea in management thinking, and governments built bureaucracies, and it was a good thing they did, because we needed to have systems and procedures and structures to prevent graft and cronyism, patronage and corruption, and so on. Well, now, in the private sector, the architecture of the corporation is changing. What does that mean for the architecture of government? So that's my background. This is creating a perfect storm. So let's think about what this means for the business of government and for the nature of democracy. First of all, because of all of this, we're entering a new age of participation, where people can participate in the economy in ways that were previously unthinkable. So you can not only watch the evening news, you can go onto Current TV and create a news clip. Half of all of Current TV's news, it's a cable news network in the U.S., is user-generated. Current TV won the Emmy for Best News Show. Half of their content is created by their customers. You can not only use software, you can go and create and participate in the open software movement. You can go onto Google and do a mashup of crime statistics, like this guy in Chicago did, mashed up crime statistics with Google Maps, and now he's a fighter against crime, but he doesn't work for the police department. All he did was a mashup, but now he's contributing to having law and order in society. So this is a big change that's underway. People can now participate, and a new generation really wants to. So just like vertically integrated corporations are unbundling in the private sector, why don't we think about changing the architecture of government? You know what? Because the web drops collaboration costs, we can now have, rather than business webs, we can have governance webs. These are new kinds of partnerships between government, the private sector, civil society, and individual citizens. This is not about outsourcing. There's nothing in the first place to outsource. It's not about privatization. It's thinking differently about how we orchestrate capability to create government services and deliver them. It's got nothing to do with building a government website or something like that. So I'll just give you an example. Neighborhood Knowledge, Los Angeles. Governments provide data. They, rather than creating services, they create a platform that is rich with data. The governments collect data. And then they make this data available. Civil society organizations, well, in this case, in Los Angeles, the data is about stuff that would show communities are healthy or not. Petty crime statistics, school dropouts, deadbeat dads, problems with apartments and landlords and so on. And this data indicates the health of a community. So a private company creates a map of LA, and when a community starts to show signs of trouble, the map starts to change color, and you can go in. And then civil society organizations and citizens go in, they intervene in the community, they figure out what the problem. There's a couple of landlords in collusion, they're doing really bad stuff, they figure it out, they fix it before it becomes a big problem. This is not outsourcing. There's nothing in the first place. It's a whole new model of how we create services for citizens, which, by the way, is way cheaper and creates better value and better services and reaches out to that need in the population now to become engaged and become involved. This is this one called Crime Reports. Government has a platform. So government provides all kinds of information about criminal activity, and citizens do mashups with Google Maps. You can now, this is amazing, just go there, Crime Reports, move your mouse around, you can helicopter down into any single community in any neighborhood and figure out what kind of problems there are in that neighborhood. Again, it wasn't created by government. Government just provided the data, but there are all kinds of people in society who have a real desire to use data to do good things. Rather than government as service provider, government as a platform. This is a big, I'm working with the Obama people in Washington. They're very big on this right now, government as a platform. H1N1, rather than having government people all around the place, doing all the stuff around the world regarding H1N1, you collect data, you make it available, and then healthcare professionals, citizens, local governments, all kinds of other people get engaged. They do a mashup and they find out what's going on with H1N1. Healthcare. You've got the irresistible force for pressures to cut back on the cost of healthcare in Canada meets up with an immovable object of public expectations. The public wants healthcare to be better, not worse. The United States, this is a really big problem. 50 million people uninsured, another 100 million woefully underinsured. Healthcare is like 19% of the GDP. And I know as Canadians, we all watch this debate with bewilderment on why they just can't do the right thing and have a single payer. But there's a whole new way of thinking about this that involves all this government 2.0 thinking. Here's a plan. See, because people are self-organizing around healthcare and all these different levels. Information seeking, like WebMD. Anybody here been onto WebMD or one of these sites? You had a sick kid and you wanted to just figure out how serious is this? Blogs and discussion groups. Doctissimo has 20 million people in France that discuss health on Doctissimo. You have all these Q&A websites like Answer Bag. There are actual wikis like Flu Wiki and Cancer Wiki and so on, where professionals are collaborating, building new healthcare content. You have stuff like Swarm Intelligent, RateMyMD.com. And boy, I remember back in the day, I just graduated from university, and I had I'd hurt my back, and I went into a doctor, and he did some diagnostic stuff, and I asked him a question, and he said, hold it, hold it. I'm the doctor, you're the patient. I ask the questions. This is in Ontario, a few decades ago. I ran into this guy 2 other times. One of the regrets in my life, he's now retired, is that I never sued him. He operated on me with a broken light in an operating room. Told the nurse to bring in a flashlight one day. Anyway, and we joke about this, but the healthcare system is the #3 killer of people in Canada and the United States with this kind of stuff, and with botched diagnoses and drug interactions and all the rest. Support communities, Caring Bridge. If you had a rare disease in the past, you were isolated. Now you go into these communities like Patients Like Me, the people for people who have rare diseases. You get to collaborate. People want to be engaged in their own healthcare. So how could we exploit this? Here's a proposal. Minister of Health. Anyone here from the Department of Health or the ministry? Too bad. I said this to George Smitherman. I never got time to really explain it to him, but here's the plan. Whenever you're born in Ontario, you get a website, and that's your healthcare record. And it has different levels of security and access as appropriate, but you have full transparency into your own record. And you get all these great tools to manage your own health. You get, government's a platform, you get data the government has about all kinds of conditions and stuff like that. You know what? You got diabetes, you have all these great tools, you will measure your own blood sugar level, you will take better care of yourself if you have a rich environment like this. We move a lot of the burden of healthcare onto the individuals who will happily do it. Maybe they'll even start to care about stuff like obesity and other things as well. We need to get this population engaged and taking responsibility for their own health care. My evidence suggests they're dying to do that. How about collaboration within government? I call this the Wiki Workplace. This young kid, he's working for the, he always wanted to be a spy. Graduates, computer science, goes 7 levels down in Langley there, and watching these dynasty, these big billion-dollar computer systems. He gets down there, they're 15-year-old mainframes, and they don't do certain things like search. So he goes on to Google. He just starts using publicly available tools, and he starts becoming a really good computer systems spy guy, creates a wiki. People start sharing intelligence within the intelligence community. This ends up becoming Intellipedia. And now, this is going to reach out to the citizens. If you see something weird in an airport or something weird anywhere, you get to report it. It's about the collective intelligence of the world being brought to bear on stuff like security. People say, oh, this internet and wikis and all this stuff is terrible. It undermines security and we lose control because all these people get involved. You know something? It's the opposite. The way to have control is to let go and to open up and to harness the capability that exists out there. The White House has a huge open government initiative. Are you familiar with this? If you work for government, this is the first thing you should do is go and check this out. It's very powerful. Transparency is a new force for citizen engagement and for good things. Santa Cruz City has done amazing stuff at the municipal level in terms of basically opening up our government and engaging citizens in all kinds of new ways. They work for you.com. This is in the UK. It's just a private site that got created, but they track what's going on. RateMyPolitician.com is another one now that's just up. This is George Galloway. We can go onto George Galloway's page here and learn his voting record, committees, topic of interest, recent appearances, numerology, expenses. We can find out what George had for lunch and And who paid for the lunch? Now, there's a side to this with public information and so on that's sort of overkill. But, and freedom of information is a huge burden on governments. But on the other hand, this is like governments are going to be naked. And as they recently found out in the UK, if you're going to be naked, fitness is no longer optional. If you're going to be naked, you better be buff. So, I didn't say anything about websites. I didn't say anything about e-gov. I never mentioned government portholes. You know, rather than a porthole where we pull all this stuff together and make it really integrated for you as a citizen, you know what the FBI is doing? For stuff like the 10 most wanted list, rather than creating a government portal where you go to it and learn about the 10 most wanted, they create a widget. It's called the Web 2.0. A widget. It's just a little chunk of software, and it goes out onto the internet and plants itself in cash registers and in convenience stores in high crime areas. It's not about a portal and websites where you come to me because I'm a good government and I integrate all this for you. It's the opposite. It's about distributing the capability of government out there to the convenience store where it really matters. It's just a different way of thinking about government. Now, the first wave of democracy established elected and accountable institutions, but there's a weak public mandate and citizens were inert. I think we can move to a second wave, characterized by strong representation, but a new culture of public deliberation built on active citizenship. How so? Well, one of the interesting projects actually in Canada, the Green Party, and I'm not political here, okay? I'm not involved in the Green Party, but the Green Party is created its program with a wiki. If you're a member of the Green Party, you could go onto this wiki, just like Wikipedia, and you could write in, all corporations in Canada should be exploited and placed under workers' control and all profits placed towards saving the environment. You could put that in the wiki, but it would never stay. Because other people would say, well, actually, that's not a reasonable proposal. And a huge discussion would happen around that, and eventually they came to agreement on everything in their program. It's a little different than other political parties. Political parties have become institutions for raising money and fielding candidates. They used to be places where you talked about ideas. Habitat Jam. 40,000 people participated in a 3-day conversation about how to improve housing in the world. You can now have a conversation with 40,000 people over 3 days. In fact, IBM did this with 400,000 people over 3 days. It was called their Innovation Jam. Well, if you can do it with 400,000 people, why couldn't the Premier of Ontario do it involving 4 million people? He'd pick a topic, say, I don't know, whatever. Climate change? Be a good one. How can we reduce carbon emissions in Ontario? This is not about citizens telling governments what to do. It's not about direct democracy. We have representative democracy for good reason. But it's also not the old model. I'm a politician. Listen to this negative advertising where I attack my opponents around issues, by the way, if you're a young person, you could care less about. And then you go vote for me, and then I'm going to broadcast to you for 4 years, and then we get to do it all over again. That may have been appropriate for my generation that grew up being broadcast. I was in recipient mode my entire childhood. I was broadcast to by my parents in the old traditional, father knows best family. The org chart was mom reported to dad, and the kids reported to mom. I mean, I was kid number 1, so that meant the dog reported to me, so I had some, power. But I was broadcast to by my minister in the church. When I went to school, I was broadcast to by a teacher, said, I'm a teacher, I have knowledge, you're a student, you're an empty vessel, you don't, get ready, here it comes. Then I went into the workforce and I was broadcast to by, hi, I'm your boss, welcome to traditional command and control enterprising. I'm a boss. A boss is someone who's an authority on everything. Listen up. Well, this generation has grown up very differently. And they don't want to be broadcast to, they want to be engaged. Now, Obama figured this out in the United States. He created a platform whereby 35,000 communities powered by young people brought him to power. If anything, I think he's having trouble right now because he's backed off that. He's trying to make deals with people rather than, you know, you're never going to make a deal around health care. There's going to be winners and losers. You got to mobilize the population to defeat the status quo. So life is complicated there. I'm sure there are things that I wouldn't know about, but this is not just about how to get elected, although he was able to do that effectively to get elected. It should change the way that you govern as well. Wiki's enabling more direct involvement in government. So here are some of the things you could do. You start with referenda and elections way down at the bottom, but then get into recommendations, into education with policy portals, targeted communications, and so on. And then the idea zone, which is the most interesting one to me, where I mentioned moderated brainstorming being an example of one of the things that could be done. I'm working with two other premiers on this, actually, Jean Charest and Premier Campbell in British Columbia. And I'm hopeful that our premier in Ontario here will do something as well, which is why I agree to do talks like this, because I'm trying to generate some interest. We need to fundamentally change democracy. And, you know, in Canada, young people are not engaged in the democratic process. And this is a really, not just unhelpful thing, it's a potentially dangerous thing for the society. So, perfect storm causing us to rethink government. We can make changes through the web to the architecture of government and how we create capability. Could we think of government as a platform? Of course, governments also need to create services, don't get me wrong. Governments have to act in the interests of all citizens, collectively. That may not be in the interests of some citizens. Governments have to force us to do things. Governments don't act in the interests of criminals. We have laws and a whole criminal justice system that is against the interests of criminals. But we have that because the role of governments is to think about the common good, the public good. But there are opportunities now to fundamentally change the way that we create these services, the way that we deliver them, and how we get capability in society to do the things that we need as a society. And finally, I think there are big opportunities to change the ways that citizens are engaged with their state, the nature of democracy itself. And if we do, we'll engage a new generation. That's kind of important in my mind because we're leaving them, my generation is leaving them with some pretty nasty problems. If you think about the way the world is today, we need to rebuild most of our institutions. We're deeply divided around the world. Economically, we have huge problems. In our institutions, we need more than, you know, the financial services industry in the United States needs more than a fresh infusion of capital and some new regulation. It needs a whole new operating model based on integrity and based on transparency and interdependence and so on. We have 40 years to reindustrialize the planet, according to the most positive estimates of the real serious scientists. If we don't get an agreement in Copenhagen in December, I don't know about you, but I'm moving to Fiji. I'm going to take everyone I care about with me. No, seriously, the stakes here are very, very high. And we need this new generation to have the power, to have the tools, and to have the structures and the context whereby they can bring their collective genius to bear, hopefully to solve these problems. Any of you who are not from Ontario would love to get your government or organization. The City of Toronto is also a member of this program as well, so if you're from Toronto, you have access. It's called Government 2.0, and send me an email.